everybody, and welcome to another episode of Leslie Said What. So, guys, welcome again to all those who are new here tonight, those who are joining us because they're always here, and we appreciate you. But tonight, as always, we are continuing our series on the storm that built my story. And guys, if you have been missing it, trust me, you want to go back and catch the replays because I'm telling you, it has been off the chain. Like, it has been definitely superseded my expectations. Let's just say that. So if you need to catch the replay at www.lesliesaidwhat.com because these stories have been such a blessing. So our third person coming up this week is Miss Ciara Flowers. You guys may have seen from my promotional poster that I posted this week, Ciara is going to be sharing her story on how God's miracle after 5 years of lost babies and infertility. She's going to talk about that tonight. So for those of you who are joining us, feel free, like I always say, to join the conversation. Okay, so say hi, hello in the comments so that we know that you're here. If you have a question, a comment, any of those things, don't forget you can comment below and it will pop up right here for us to address it. So feel free to ask questions and join the conversation. Again, be sure to tell us that you're here. Now, without further ado, I am going to bring on Miss Ciara Flowers. Hey, Ciara!
Hi, Leslie.
How are you?
I'm well. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Oh, I'm so glad you can make it. I'm so glad we can make it work in our schedules because I know like you are super, super busy. Yes, Ciara. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So, as you mentioned, my name is Ciara Flowers. And first and foremost, I am a Christian, so I am a believer. I'm a wife, a mom, and I guess one thing that's really important and so dear to my heart is that I am a baby loss and infertility advocate. So my heart really goes out to all the women who have experienced what I have, and then families as well. So that's kind of where I guess the breadth of my heart goes out to that particular group of people.
Yes, well, your heart definitely shows through. I followed your journey on your Instagram account, Miscarried Dreams. Love that name, by the way. It's so fitting. It's so fitting. So, guys, definitely check that out. I'll put that information down at the end. But so, Ciara, let's tell everybody how we know each other.
Oh my gosh. You reminded me that it's been like 20 years.
Yes, it's been literally, guys. This is the first time Ciara and I have literally physically been in front of each other in almost 20 years. That's insane.
Yes, I still can't believe it's been that long since we were in undergrad together. Oh my goodness. Though we were like babies our freshman year.
I know, it's crazy. Yes, guys, we are LU alumni, Liberty University. Whoop whoop! Shout out.
Remember we used to do the LU, something like that. I can't do it.
I was never
I can't
really
do
good
it,
at
but
like I think like Ellie and them helped me do it, but I always do it backwards. But it's like
me too. I would get lost.
Exactly. Oh yeah, leave it to me. Yeah, so we are just so happy to have you. Hello, Becky. We are so glad you're here, Sister Becky. So yeah, like you guys have no idea. Like, our time at Liberty was the best. I'm sorry, they say college friends are forever friends, and they are. Ciara, we hadn't talked since that time frame, and literally we hit things right off a couple weeks ago when we talked. So literally, college friends are legit forever friends.
Yes, I can 100% attest to that. We were able to pick up right where we left off, like no time at all had passed.
Exactly. It's amazing. So yes, Ciara, so we have you here tonight to share your amazing, beautiful story about your God's miracle after 5 years of lost babies and infertility. Would you go ahead and share your story with us?
Yeah, sure. And thanks again for allowing me to come on here and then share. I remember one day I was praying to God and I was just like, if you do decide to bless me with a child, one of the things I'm going to do no matter what, and no matter where I am, if someone mentions that they're in the same situation that I am coming out of, I'm going to first and foremost ask them if they would mind if I prayed with them right then and there. Because I do want to make sure I give that person the space to want to pray. I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but I do want to make sure that I am there to listen as well as support someone else. So, my story, I didn't grow up wanting to get married or have a family. Honestly, I used to picture the ideal scenario for me was to have this house. It was going to be a big house with a lot of natural light coming in. I was just going to be able to be by myself because I come from a family where there's like 5 of us. So there's always someone in your space doing something. And I just wanted, I guess, my own quiet area, quiet time. And it wasn't until years later, once I had kind of towards the ending of graduating from college and going into my master's, I was like, oh, I think I would like somebody. And God was like, let's pause on that just a little bit. But I remember just with meeting my husband, I remember I had been praying a bit here and there, but not having a full heartfelt prayer, just, throwing it out there here and there. And one of my best friends and I, Natalie, we had been going through the book of Ruth together. And when we came to the end of the chapter, I was like, Natalie, oh my gosh, I have this desire on my heart that I think I need to like get real with God and pray about my husband. And I was like, oh, I don't want to do it. And I remember sitting down on my bed, and I was just like, God, I don't even know why I'm bringing this up. The guy doesn't exist. First of all, the kind of guy I want doesn't exist. And if he does, he's probably already taken. And I don't know why I'm wasting my breath praying this prayer. And I didn't have an extensive list, but I had a list. I wanted obviously someone who was a believer and had their own relationship with God, absent of my own. I didn't want it to be dependent on me at all. And I wanted someone who enjoyed traveling and just loved life and was financially stable, good with money, a good head on their shoulders with that. And just an overall, just a kind person. And I wanted them to be able to, they didn't have to be best friends with my family, but I wanted both parties to respect each other. And so for me, just thinking about that, I was like, this person doesn't exist. And
that's like asking for Mr. Perfect, right?
Exactly. So I was like, oh, I hate that this is on my heart because there's no way it's going to actually come to fruition. And one of my cousins, she reached out to me. It wasn't long after praying that prayer, actually, that she reached out. She's like, hey, I actually know somebody, and he's in the Lord, and he's in church, and he's just doing things to further himself. And I think you all might hit it off. I'm like, all right, sure.
You're like, whatever, might as well.
Exactly. Mine is what do I got to lose anyway?
Exactly.
And then Dominique, my husband, he sent me a friend request on Facebook. And at the time I didn't know his name from my cousin. She didn't tell me the name, or if she did, I forgot. And I was like, I don't accept no random friend request. You need to I was like, I don't care who we have in common, because I looked and I was like, who is sending me this random friend request? I was like, and I won't accept it unless there's a personalized message. And then as soon as I'm thinking that, pop goes a message. Oh, I know your cousin Erica, and she said I should reach out and connect with you. I love the Lord. And he was just telling me about his background and ministry and some of the things he was interested in doing with God. And that at the time, I think he had traveled to like 10 or 12 countries. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Okay. All right, then, well traveled. We can check that off the list.
And so it was like all these things. I was just like, this can't be legit. So then he was like, I love to get to know you more and chat. And I was just like, Yeah, we can chat through chat. I won't be giving you my phone number or anything like that. You could be crazy.
Yeah, legit. Especially on Facebook, you got all them random people like friending you, and then
I know it was just, but I did trust that cousin's judgment. So I wasn't completely closed off, but definitely still was like, let's get to know each other through chat, and then we'll move into a phone call depending on how things go. And I remember I was just, after talking to him a bit, I was just like, I was like, God, I could truly see myself falling for this guy. If you didn't send him, take him out, not like take him out of like this life, but take him out of
take him out, Lord.
but remove him from my vicinity if you didn't send him. Because one of the things I was just like, because I didn't want to get so caught up in this relationship or whatever it was blossoming to be if it wasn't sent from God. I wanted God to move forward and remove him if he didn't wasn't the one sending him. I just didn't want it to be caught up again. You know, it's just like, look, God, I'm trying to trust you. I'm trying to walk what you do, you know. Exactly. And then I remember once we were chatting and once we started dating, and I mean, it was just a really good time. And I think one of the things a friend told me that I didn't quite hold on to like I should have. She was just like, you know, you want to make sure that you date someone in the seasons. And that really stuck with me. And also, I think one thing that I would add on to that is, you know, make sure you enjoy the time you have with that person instead of being so nitpicky, like, oh, you're not doing this, this, and that. Because Dominique ended up being exactly who I needed. Maybe not while we were dating, but the person I needed him to be when we were married and going through our losses. I mean, I couldn't have picked a better partner to go through that journey with. So had I written him off because, oh, this, you know, the nitpicking things, it wouldn't have worked out like God intended it. And I remember as we were dating, at one point, he was like, so we were just chatting about marriage or whatever. And I was like, look, 2 years is my maximum, not my minimum. I'm not sleeping with you. I'm not living with you. What am I wasting my time? I'm wasting my time if I wait any longer than 2 years. I was like, I'm not about to be anybody. I remember at the time, I was like, I'm not about to be anybody's long-term girlfriend. That just ain't me.
No, not
because like and you know, not this, you know, whatever everyone else wants to do, that's up to them. But I think for me, I was already, you know, in my mid-20s or going into my mid-20s and things like that. And at the time, I just really wanted to make sure I was following Christ, and I didn't want to step outside of that. And I really wanted to make sure that I was able to have a testimony that I could share with like other family members and cousins and stuff, like, hey, if you love God and if you just follow him, he really will bless you beyond what you can imagine. And I really wanted to live out that walk so that way they were able to see that, you know, his faithfulness. And so that's kind of how I thought about it. And again, I was thinking too, like, I'm all right. I like myself. Like, I like
I'm good by myself. I don't need nobody.
Yeah, not that I didn't need anyone, but it was just like, I like myself. I like my company. So, you know, if you truly aren't from God, like, I'm all right. I'll be okay. And I remember as we started dating and talking and getting married, once we got married, I remember it was just like such a wonderful experience. And I remember just thinking like, this is about to be it. Like, it just seemed like anything was possible after we got married. Like, there was going to be nothing that was going to necessarily derail us. It just felt like we're about to walk into amazing adventure together. And in some ways we did. Like, together we went to actually 8 countries. We've been to 8 countries together. But in the midst of all of that was just so much grief and so much heartache. About 6 months after we got married, I lost my grandmother, and she was the first significant loss I had experienced up until that point. And I remember she lived with us for quite a while growing up in and out of our home, and moving from one home to from her home to ours and things like that, throughout my lifetime. And I remember when I lost her, I wasn't aware of how connected I was. Sometimes you don't know until that person is gone and you're like, oh my goodness, like a void. And I remember just like, oh my goodness, just such grief once I lost my grandmother. And then 3 months after losing her, we went on to have our very first loss, our very first miscarriage. And I remember when we lost our first baby, it was pretty early on, and I remember thinking like, you blame yourself,
Yeah.
and you just know that it's something you did wrong, like no matter how many times people tell you. And even the way I learned about the loss was horrendous. Like I hope no one ever experiences like that. But I remember I had some spotting, some bleeding, and I went to the doctor, and I had looked it up prior to then. It's like, oh, bleeding sometimes is natural in a pregnancy. But I didn't have any cramping, so I didn't know anything about miscarriages. My grandmother, she had 12 kids, and every one of the 12 children ended up having a child. And so I have tons of cousins, tons of family members. So the thought never occurred to me that there could be loss. And I
Right.
remember I went to the OBGYN, and she checks, and she just like, you're having a miscarriage. And she said it so blatant, like just so matter of fact.
Bedside manner much?
I
Like
know,
that would
right?
have been nice.
I know. And she just said, you're having a miscarriage. And I remember I just like, what? And I was like, I need to go to the bathroom. I just need a minute. I was like, I need to. And she was just like, well, why? We'll stay. But I just needed a moment to understand what was going on. It's like I needed a break. And it's not like she wouldn't let me leave, but it seemed like she was very concerned with me stepping out of the room. And then she printed off the paperwork on like what to expect during a miscarriage. And I mean, it was just so matter of fact. It was just, here's the paperwork and go about your day. And I remember,
Wow.
I know, it was just like,
That's
and I was just so thrown off. Yeah, it was really surprising for sure, and shocking to be, just handed piece of paper and go about your day. And I remember I was just so sad because leading up into that moment, I was just feeling so many feels about being pregnant. Like, oh my gosh, am I going to be a good mom? Am I not? You just have so many conflicting feelings. You just, obviously you want to see this child, but it's like, oh my goodness, am I ready? You just going through all the emotions. And then when that life is gone, you feel a little lost in that moment. And I remember thinking just like, this somehow it was my fault. And if I could pray more, do a devote, I was like, I'm going to read the Bible in a year, because kind of like to show God, like, not necessarily I deserve a child, but I'm sorry for whatever kind of life I was living before. Some way, somehow I wasn't living up to your standard, and let me get on track with God, just to kind of help. And I remember I was reading the Bible in a year, and I'm just consuming verses. And after a couple of months, I was just like, I'm not retaining any of this information. I'm not remembering and recalling anything. And I remember sitting there, and I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to take it slowly, reading the Bible. That way I can actually retain and recall this information. I kind of did it a bit differently. And then almost a year later, it was a little over a year later, like a week or so before our second anniversary, is when we experienced our second loss. We had flown to Savannah, Georgia to meet up with some family members. And I can't explain what it's like to go on a trip pregnant with life and then to come back without. It was such a heartbreaking experience for sure. But I remember we got there, and once we landed, I remember not feeling as nauseous anymore. And I was just like, I feel great. And I hadn't felt really good in a while. And it didn't occur to me that I was losing another baby, because the doctor was like, this happens, it is normal for you to lose a pregnant, like 1 in 4 families experience a miscarriage. They said, but it's very rare that you ever have a second, like that's just so rare, no need to worry,
Oh my
basically.
goodness.
And I remember, so the thought didn't occur to me. And I remember we were on a little boat ride, and I had to use a bathroom, and I'll spare the details, but I saw, bleeding. I was just like, oh my goodness. Like, no, they said this is, I'm thinking like, no, they said this is almost impossible. And I remember telling Dominique, I was like, I think we're losing this baby too. And I had been a little nervous about flying before, but I know my husband Dominic had looked into it. He's like, the research doesn't necessarily support that, we should be concerned right now or anything like that. And, there was no, like the doctors didn't say anything. So I ended up going ahead and flying out. And I remember just being completely distraught. And I remember with that second loss, I would go through a lot of motions, but I was in a truly deep depression. I could smile. I'm a pretty bubbly person. I can hide feelings pretty well, especially in group settings and things like that. I know how to kind of not necessarily fake. It's not fakeness, but it's just kind of, it's become like a protection for me to just be able to put on a smile.
Yeah, it's your way of coping.
Exactly. So I don't know if many people knew how dark it was for me, but I remember just being so hurt. And because my background is in psychology and counseling, I did seek therapy, and I sought it right when I had lost my grandmother. I went in and I continued into that first loss. And because we end up moving where we are now, I end up going with like a women's group later on and what have you. But I remember after the second loss, it was just like I was like this focused person. I was like, no, we're gonna have a baby. You just put all your energy just finding ways to strengthen your immune, whatever it took, I was gonna do.
Yeah, you're like, I'm gonna do whatever I gotta do to make sure.
Yeah. Yes, it was almost like, well, if God ain't gonna do it, I'm gonna do, whatever it takes. And there's just something visceral about, infertility. It just pushes you even outside of yourself. It's like you can't help it. It becomes a biological need for some people, not all, but for some people it becomes a biological need that you have got to do whatever it takes to get that miracle. And that's kind of was my driving force during that time, after the second loss. And then in between all of this, we would travel and do things like that. And like I said, we end up going to 8 countries total. But every trip we went on, it didn't matter. I would wake up in the middle of the night. I would like stare out the window, and I was just so, it was tainted. The trips, the memories, everything was tainted in grief.
Yeah.
And then almost a year to that date, it was like a week before Mother's Day the next year is when we had our third loss. And I just knew with that third baby, I just knew they were going to make it. Like, you couldn't have told me that I wasn't going to have that baby in my arms that following year. Like, I wouldn't have believed anybody if they had told me I would also go on to lose that child as well. And I remember when we were pregnant with the third baby, once we had our third loss, I ended up having like tons of different dreams, and I'll share a little bit of that because miscarried dreams came about. There are several layers to that miscarried dream Instagram account. And I remember when we were pregnant with our third baby, I sat there and I remember I was just like so excited for this next life. But I remember having a dream, and in the dream I was at a park, and I was sitting on a park bench, and there was a little baby boy sitting next to me. So he's sitting here on the side of me, and I'm in the middle, and then God. I couldn't see God's face, but I knew it was God sitting next to me. And like I said, I was in the middle. And I remember just sitting there, and I ended up moving the baby to be in between myself and God. So I put him in the middle because I was like, oh, I'm gonna put you closer to God so you could be more protected, right? And then the following night I had the dream again, and this time I moved him to where on the opposite side of God, where God was sitting in the middle. And then as soon as I moved him there, the little baby, he jumped off the bench and started running in this field. And I jumped up because I'm like, oh my goodness, like, where is he going? Like, I need to protect him. And I jumped up to chase after him. And I saw that God was there with him, and they were getting out of my line of sight. But I was just like, but as long as he's with God, he's going to be okay. And I thought of it in terms of like he was going to become a missionary, and I had to trust his life to Christ. Little did I know that it was gonna be, I was losing another baby.
Yeah.
In hindsight, that sounds nice. Oh,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, in hindsight is correct.
Yeah. And I remember when I lost that third baby. Oh my goodness, such anger and such deep. Like, I mean, I was, like I said, I had been depressed after that second loss, but nothing could prepare me for the feelings I felt that third time around. And throughout this journey, especially getting into that third loss, I always err on the side of I need help. So I go to therapy, and I went to a women's group because I wanted to be around other people who had experienced something similar. And it was helpful, but I will say it took me 4 therapists until I found one that even remotely had a similar situation to mine. God really worked it out where the last therapist I had, she was actually she was practicing Islam, and so a lot of the faith principles were there. So she was able to just give that perspective of having faith, and also going through infertility herself and experiencing loss of babies, and going through IVF, so fertility treatments and IUI. So she understood the whole gamut of emotions, and then she went on, and then she also led a women's group, and so that's how I was able to connect with her and others. But right before
I stop you for a second. So with the 3 baby losses, was it as a result of infertility, or was it that those were times that you had gotten pregnant on your own?
All of it I had gotten pregnant on my own. But I always say infertility, technically infertility is if you haven't gotten pregnant within a particular time frame. So if you are under 35, it's about 2 years typically. If you haven't gotten pregnant in about 2 years of trying, if you're under 35, then that meets the criteria of infertility. And then if you're 35 or older, if you've been trying for a year and you haven't had a successful you haven't gotten pregnant, then that constitutes infertility. And that's why
I had no idea.
Yeah, and that's what was really hard for me too, because so after we had our third loss, and I'll go kind of backtrack to some of the feelings there. I with the I was using a particular for my job, I was trying to get fertility treatments, but because I didn't actually meet the criteria of infertility, I was unable to go through fertility treatments through the healthcare provider because I didn't meet that standard. So I was just like, but I need help, like I'm unable to carry a baby to term. But infertility, because of the standards that they had it as, I didn't fall under it. So it became a whole nother thing. But I remember just going back to that loss of that third baby, I was just so distraught and so angered. And I mean, I've never been that angry with God before in my life, but I remember, I don't know if you can hear the little Gabriel.
Yeah.
He has a little cold, so trying to
Aw,
wipe his little nose has been pretty
I'm
daunting.
sure.
So
No
yeah,
worries.
trying to get him. My husband's trying to take care of him, and so he's run. He can't run, but he's walking away and just like, no, leave
He's
me
like,
alone.
no.
Yeah. But I remember with that third loss, I remember one day I was talking to God, and I was just like, I can't. I hate you. I was like, I've never hated someone before, but in this moment, I do. I hate you. You're not a friend. You're not for me. Even my own parents who love me would never treat me the way you did. And you're supposed to love me better than anyone else ever could. And instead, you're literally just going along, taking all my babies away. So you're not a friend of mine. Everything in the Bible wasn't true about who you say you are. Because if you were who you say you are, you wouldn't do this to me. And I had been a Christian for such a long time that even though I was saying those things, like, I wasn't just gonna get up and, I didn't know what it would mean to not still read my Bible, to not that I was trying to, check things off a list, but it had just been so ingrained in me at that point that I was saying these things, but I didn't know what that meant for my relationship anyway. But I did. Instead, what I would do is read verses like Lamentations 3 and read about Job's story. And instead of reading to the end where things worked out, I would just stay and focus on the parts of their grief. Like with Job, there's one verse where he says, I miss the days of old when my children were around me and God was for me. Something along those lines. And that verse just stuck with me so much because I understood that depth of pain, because I missed that time where I felt God's presence, or felt that, no matter what, no matter how hard life is, God is still going to be by my side. He's still going to be my friend. He's still going to look out for me. It'll all work out in the end. And at that time, I just couldn't believe that.
Yeah.
And after that third loss, I was just, it just was really heartbreaking. I remember just being so distraught, and angry, just so filled with rage towards God, like just really, really angry. And I stopped going to church. I remember my husband's like, "Are you going to go to church?" Like, you can.
Right. You're like, yeah, you can go to church if you want to. I ain't going.
I'm like, what's the point? We read these scriptures and we sing these songs, and you walk out like, yeah, God's coming through, and yeah, he's on my side. But then that wasn't the case for me. For years, that wasn't the case for me, even though I had so much hope and so much faith and so much belief. And I would go up to the front in church to get prayed for time and time and time again, and my situation never changed. Not only did it not change, it got worse.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then finally, I work at Johns Hopkins now, and I remember when I came to Hopkins, their benefits package was really good, and they did cover infertility. And it didn't
Wow,
just
that's
mean,
rare.
yeah, in the state of Maryland, all of the employers have to cover fertility treatments. They have to at least, yeah. So not cover it 100%, but there has to be, some kind of coverage for it.
Wow.
So, yeah. So I remember when we were able to go through fertility treatments, when we sat down, did IVF, and I just knew IVF, like, God closed every other door, but this is the one, like, he's IVF. Of course,
IVF. That's it. By George, I've got it.
Yeah, exactly. My golden ticket is IVF,
Yeah. And for those of you who don't know what IVF is, it's in vitro fertilization. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, thank you. yeah, so I was just like, this is my golden ticket to my little baby. It's about to be on and popping. You know, like you couldn't tell me nothing.
Right.
And I remember I sat there and after you go through stimulation and they're able to retrieve your eggs, and then from there they create embryos for you, and then when the embryos reaches a certain maturation point, then they transfer them into your uterus for you to have a baby. And I remember when we sat down with the doctor, and first she called me, and she just was saying that she said, prepare yourself. I'll never forget that. She said, prepare yourself. And we end up having 4 embryos. And she was like, based on your age, they thought I would get a lot more eggs, have, a lot more success, but we only had 4 embryos. And she said, basically, none of them were viable. And I remember I never hyperventilated before in my life until that moment. But it was like I had a panic attack of sorts. And I remember when I got off the phone, I just could not catch my breath. And I just was like crying. I mean, you just had all this hope. I mean, I was already afraid of needles. So sticking myself daily, twice a day with multiple shots in that period, and just trying your hardest to stay positive and think positive thoughts, and just making sure that you're doing things a certain way to come out with the best outcome, and to have no viable embryos, not even getting to a place where they were able to implant an embryo. I didn't even get it that far. I was just like, what in the world? And then
just 1 second, Ciara. For those of you just joining us, Ciara is now commenting on the fact that she had three miscarriages, right? 3 miscarriages, and then she went in for IVF, and then when she went in for IVF, they pulled 4 embryos, and none of them were viable. So now we're looking at 4 losses.
And I'm thank you for saying that it's a loss, because I think when people hear that someone went through IVF and it didn't work out, it's like, oh, okay, well, try again, instead of thinking that that's a part of grief. You're grieving the journey that you didn't have. You're grieving the baby that you didn't get a chance to experience in your womb and carry, because you put all this hope in thinking that the outcome would be that child, and when it isn't, you're stuck back at ground zero, back at the beginning all over again, and you're just having to recoup and regroup. And we ended up switching from that particular fertility treatment because it felt like we were just another number. I remember the nurse called and left. I still have the voicemail from 2 or 3 years ago, and she was just like, I'm so sorry, but whenever you're ready, we're here to start again. I'm like, good gosh,
right? Give me a second.
It felt like it was a baby meal. Just pop out we're just gonna get you to pop that out. Pop out.
Yeah.
And so we went to a new clinic, and I remember I really liked that clinic a lot. But I remember when I was talking to them, I was just like, I couldn't understand how they were going to get me, not just pregnant, but how are you going to get me to a place where I'm going to be able to keep a pregnancy? How are you going to get me to carry a child to term? And so I didn't understand how, because it wasn't very clear to me how that particular clinic was going to help me. But I ended up doing 2 IUI, which I can't remember what IUI stands for now. Just poop.
Yeah, I have no idea what IUI stands for. That's where I'm out.
Intrauterine insemination, something like that.
Something like that.
Apologies. But I remember we did 2 rounds of that. And again, I didn't have as much hope for IUI because the statistics are kind of more like a shot in the dark with IUI as opposed to IVF.
It's intrauterine insemination. Yeah.
Intrauterine insemination. And I remember we did those 2 rounds, and again, there we were unsuccessful. And I remember when we did the second IUI, because you have like, if your period doesn't come on within a 2-week time period, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm pregnant. Like, it's gotta be, yeah. And I remember I went and I got my blood drawn, and they're like, "You're not pregnant." I was like, "But it didn't come on. Like, what do you mean?"
So now we're at 5 losses, girl. I don't know how you're functional.
Well, and that's the thing. I'm glad you said that. Like, you don't know how I'm functional, because what ended up happening is that after we got those results back for the IUI, water, getting around a body of water has always been helpful to me. It's just been very peaceful, very calming. It just helps me to just take some time to reflect and just have a moment to myself. And I remember after that, it was the summer of 2018. And I told my husband, like, let's just go to, I think it was like Annapolis Harbor. And we went there. And this was the first time in my life that being around a body of water didn't soothe me, didn't help comfort me. And instead, I remember we were sitting there on the dock. And as I was sitting there, I said to him, I mean, I didn't say anything to my husband, but I'm sitting there thinking, and he's sitting next to me. And it just I felt this overwhelming urge to just fall in the water and just let it be over. You know, like, I had already lost 3 babies. I had already experienced failures with 1 IVF and 2 IUIs. Like, there was no hope. It was just like I was sitting there just like, life is hopeless. This is it. You'll never experience what you've been hoping and craving and desiring for. Like, you've been abandoned by God. Like, he ain't here. You know, like, you have nothing. And I remember sitting there and I was just thinking how easy it would just be to just let it go and just fall into the water. And I remember as I was sitting, and like I said, I've been going through therapy. I've been going to women's group and, you know, being around other people who are in my same situation. But in that moment, it just felt so daunting. What I had already been through was just so stricken by grief that it just felt like there was no, like, what was the point of living? Like, there was just a point of who wants to be a mother without their children, who wants to live without them. And I remember as I was sitting there contemplating just falling in, I thought about, well, if I fall in this water, Dominique is going to jump in to try to save me. And I was like, and it would be just my luck that something would happen to me, that happened to him, and then it'd be my fault. And I was like, and this someone, or what if someone else jumps in trying to help both of us, and then that person loses, you know, then I'm responsible for other people's, you know, heartache, and I end up surviving. I was like, that would be just my luck. And I don't know.
I'm sorry to laugh. I was trying so hard not to laugh, but I'm so sorry. Okay, I'm done. It's true. People don't get it. Because then literally when you're at that low point, you're like, well, crap, I got to worry about everybody else and what's going to happen to them. So, yeah, you just stop because you're like, well, I'm going to be endangering not only me, but 5 other people. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. And so I was just like, and then that was how it pretty much ended for me. And that I remember, like, a doctor later on, she did prescribe me like an antidepressant, but I had a bad experience with it because I felt exhausted. Like, I felt drained. Like, it was hard to, like, get up. Not to, you know, and everyone experiences things differently. It just didn't quite work out well for me. And like I said, because my background is psychology and, yeah, my master's in human services organizational studies, so I still had some of that counseling experience. I'm a proponent of counseling, of therapy, of medicine. You know, if you if you heal your body, you need to heal your mind too. They go hand in hand.
Right.
So, so I always just continue to try to seek help. And like I said, in the midst of all of this, I was having these dreams where God would be in my dreams. Like I knew he was there, but I just was like, what's the point of having these dreams if I don't have a baby? Like,
Yeah.
and I remember another dream I had is it's interesting because these dreams could be really interesting for sure. But another one I had is that my heart, it didn't look like, how we draw a little heart or how the human heart actually looks, but it's like it was a I don't know, like an orb of sorts. But I knew it was my heart, and it was sitting on a ledge, and it just happened to fall. It just rolled off the ledge and fell, and it shattered in like a million
Wow.
pieces. And I remember sitting there and I was like crying because my heart was shattered. And God came over and he glued it back together with gold. And I was like, oh, my heart, my heart is intact. And then he went outside to this garden of sorts, and then he planted it. And I was like, oh, my heart is a seed. And then a tree grew. And I was like, my heart is a tree.
You're like interpreting your own dreams. You're like,
in the midst of it, I'm trying to interpret like, it's a tree. And then the tree, there was fruit. And so when the fruit, I was like, my heart is a fruit. And then when the fruit fell on the ground, it just kept producing more and more trees and fruit. I mean, it was just this incredible dream. I don't have the gift of interpretation. So I just woke up like, what?
What is happening?
Yeah. So, like I said, throughout the journey, just so many different dreams. And in 2019, I remembered we tried again for IVF with a new clinic, and this doctor was willing to I guess listen to some of my concerns, because at that point, after you have 3 losses, you're diagnosed with recurrent pregnancy loss. And I told her my diagnosis. She ran tests, and she was able to do some treatments. She also gave me a vitamin and like a regimen to follow when it came to vitamins and supplements. And so I just knew, like she knows what she's doing. Like, no one gave me all of this stuff. So
Right.
again, I'm like, this is it. Like,
this is gonna work.
Exactly, this one will work. And this time, again, we got down to the last embryo, and she said, multiple abnormalities. And so with that, they just don't recommend. Yeah. So I just, just like, well, I'm done. Like, I don't have
it.
Right. It's just not. Exactly. It's just like, it just isn't meant to be ever. And I just didn't have it in me to try anymore, and again, that was 2019. It was like towards the ending of 2019 and right around my birthday when I was going to try, it would have been us like trying IVF, like where they actually implanted the embryo like around my birthday in 2019 of November. And I ended up just being like, oh, whatever. Exactly. And throughout this time, people would say, you just got to trust God's timing. You just got to believe it to be. And you got to do what and all these things. And
like, stop talking to me.
Exactly. Forget my name.
For real. Don't call me. Don't ask me. Like, I know it sounds terrible, but I was almost to a point where I was like, don't even pray for me. I'm good.
Exactly. Because they get, people have this word from God. And I don't want to be dismissive of that. But my thing is that if you hear someone like me, their story, keep that word of God to yourself until he literally says, no, I need you to walk up to them tomorrow. And obviously God rarely does he just, but unless if you truly feel this push in your heart that I have to say something to them, pray about it, take a beat, truly pray and see, is that you just wanting to give someone a word because no, their circumstances has to change, or is that really God leading you and impressing upon you to speak on their journey? Because if it's not God, all you're doing is bringing more pain.
Exactly. And if you are in doubt, throw it the frick out. Do not come and tell me nothing that God has not confirmed in you to tell me. Because I promise you, if one more person had come to me and told me that I'm going to have a baby by this time next year, I was going to punch them in the face. Like, don't pray for me. Like, get away from me. Stop praying for me. Like, leave me alone. So I totally get that. I totally get that. Oh, we have one comment here from Carolyn. She says, I lost my second child to a miscarriage. The amount of people that don't acknowledge miscarriage and unsuccessful fertility treatments as an actual loss baffles me. I've been told, oh, it's normal for women. Like somehow that makes the grief less.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well said, Carolyn.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah, and the thing is with that, Carolyn, is it's like people just don't I honestly feel like it almost comes down to something similar to the ones who like it's so easy to say if you haven't been through it.
Yeah.
It's like it's easier for people to comment on things they know nothing about or what they just think a blanket answer will fix. So I think that also is what comes down to it. And it's just not okay. Just because it's normal or it happens does not make the grief easier.
Yes, exactly. And I remember throughout our journey, someone would say, "Are you sure you want a child?" And or you will, haha, you can have mine. And it's like when I lost my grandmother, no one was like, "Well, Betty Sue down the corner got a grandma. Why don't you just go over there and borrow hers?"
Right. Literally, that's what people say. You can come get my kids anytime. Or, oh, do you want mine? Or the one that used to drive me crazy is the amount of people that try to make me their child's freaking godmother. Like, do not make me your child's godparent. Do you not understand how that messes with my head? Like, no. It's just not okay for me. It's just not okay. But that, I mean, obviously it's my situation. But again, I was also one of those people that like, if you quoted Hannah to me and what Hannah can do and what God did for Hannah, mind your business. like they quote Hannah, they quote Rebecca, I think it is. And then Samson's mom and all these other people who were barren originally. And it's like, that's their story. That is not necessarily my story. Stop quoting to me what you don't know is confirmed by God is my story. Mind your business. And I had one guest on, I think it was 2 years. No, actually she came back on a couple months ago. And she said that what she wants to tell people is to mind your own womb. That's literally what it comes down to. It's just to mind your own womb. Oh, we have a couple more comments. If they don't even want their child, why you want them? Exactly. Exactly, Carolyn. Like what? Clearly. Don't put it over here. Sister Becky says, I lost 2. I think the worst thing people said to me was like, well, at least you had 1. Be thankful. Oh, Sister Becky, yeah, that's no, that is horrible. That is just horrible. Like, and it's always interesting what people allow to come out of their mouths before they think. Think before you speak, guys. It's like that's like talking 101. Think before you speak.
Yeah. And I think I know people don't know what to say and they're just trying to fill an uncomfortable silence. But yeah, you're right. They just need to, we all need to take a beat and to really think about it. And if you do want to say something, just pray. Pray for that person. You don't necessarily have to say, I know God's gonna bring about your child. Just pray for that. If that's really what's been, you don't have to share that. You can continue to pray in silence and in secret and what have you.
Exactly. And Ciara, can you tell us about your when you found out this time around?
Sure. Yeah. Again, like I said, I had given up, and I remember the pastor I had when I was in Lynchburg, Virginia, where Liberty is, and I remember he somehow he had messaged me on January 2020, and he was just saying that I'm praying, and I just know your miracle is on the way, your child, and I was just like, not again, no.
Like, look, don't tell me that. You're like, oh, here we go again.
But with him, he's such a kind-hearted person, Pastor Walker, and I was able to just vent, and we just were chatting back and forth, and I was able to just vent the feelings, vent the frustration, and he just continued to love on me and just continued to allow me to express myself however I needed to express it. Because in January 2020 was the first New Year's that I was like, I ain't got nothing to celebrate. No, we're not celebrating anything. I remember with my husband, like every year I would get, excited for the next year, thinking this is my year. And I was like, no, I'm not celebrating. What's there to celebrate? There ain't nothing good to celebrate.
You're like, no, I won't.
On principle. and we ended up and again, just going back to dreams, honestly, I remember I had this random dream, or what I assume was random, and in the dream I had I was in this temple, those old temples that you see, just a picture of the older temples, how they were built. Mm-hmm. And I remember I was standing outside the temple and I walked in, and as I walked in, I turned around and God was standing like right behind me, or I knew it was God. Like I said, I just always knew when it was a dream. And I remember turning to Jesus. I do believe in the Trinity, so Jesus, God, Holy Spirit, all in one.
Uh-huh.
And I remember I was just like, in my mind, it's like, what are you doing here? I haven't seen you in a while, because I think at that point I hadn't had, the last dream I had was like maybe a month or two prior to that, or it had been some time between the last dream. And I was like, I haven't had a dream before. What are you doing? And I remember as soon as that thought came, the thought that replaced it was just like, it's over. It's like I just knew it was over, and I just was so thankful, and I fell down prostrate, and I was just like thanking God at his feet. And I was just like, I don't know how, in the Bible, they talk about the story of the, in the New Testament, there's a story of like the lepers, right? And everyone gets healed, and he's like, go to the temple, make sure, they call you clean. And so everyone except the one, the one comes back, he's just like thanking God or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know how they left you, because I ain't never leaving you.
You are hilarious. Yes. I know that as well.
And I was like, man, if I walk with you, I'd be on you like white on brush. You ain't never good and out of my sight. And I remember waking up from the dream, and what's interesting is that very next day, that morning, my husband's like, oh my gosh, look. It was like, so I've never seen a dove in real life, but I've seen pictures of a dove. And on our windowsill was this white bird that looked very much like a dove that you would see in a book.
Wow.
And I remember I walked down the steps and I look up, and there's that white bird, dove, pigeon, whatever you want to call it. And as soon as I saw it, the verse that just immediately popped in my mind was, this is my son who I am well pleased. And I just like, interesting. And so that bird was there for like 12 hours. And it was just, I took a picture of it and everything, just like interesting. And then the following day, I had some spotting. I was like, God, I think this might be implantation, but I can't. I was like, no. Yes, no.
Yes, it's like you just try not to let your head go there.
Yeah, because you try to be cautious, because of everything you've been through. And I remember it was a while before I took a pregnancy test, and I didn't even tell Dominique anything that I was thinking, the dream, nothing. And I remember I took a pregnancy test. I was like, oh my gosh, no. Right. Like I'm spazzing out, and then I think it was like week 7 or week 8. I remember I was thinking about how I wanted to tell Dominique, what I wanted to do, something big and all these things. And that morning I woke up and it looked like there was some spotting. And so I got because of my history, I got really nervous, and I told Dominique, I was like, I think my asthma is flaring up. Can you take me to the hospital or clinic? And this is during so this is during COVID, right? So we are in, I think it was like towards the ending of the summer, so like it could be around August. Was it August? Because I found out like in May, so maybe it was like June or July, I guess. So we're in June or July, and things are shut down in 2020. And I'm trying to schedule an appointment to see a doctor, and I finally found a doctor, and it ended up being this whole thing. I get to the doctor, she's like, "Oh, based on your history, I'm actually not the right practitioner. You got to go to someone." And I'm like, "I might be having a miss. What you mean?" I'm just like,
I need help.
Yeah, I'm like, because of my history, you need somebody got to help me. And so I'm scouring like the internet looking for a clinic that's open or whatever. And Dominique's like, "Well, what's going on?" Because the whole time I'm keeping hitting in the dark. I'm like, my asthma. We just gotta go to this other.
My asthma.
And then finally, I break down. I'm crying. I'm just like, I'm pregnant and I'm nervous. And he's like, "Wait, what? What's going on? Wait, what?"
We was talking about asthma. Now you gotta get my brain to shift to something else.
Yeah, he's like, "I thought you said it was asthma." Like, this is not asthma. I lied because I was trying to surprise you.
Yes, you're like, "Here's your surprise. Get me to a hospital."
Exactly. Keep up.
Right.
And so we went to a clinic, and looking back, it was really it was interesting that this clinic allowed both of us to go in, and they did a check, and we were able to see that everything was fine with our little baby Gabriel. And that was the first and last time that Dominique was actually able to be in the room with me. Any other time I had to actually call him, and we had to do video chat because of COVID. But that was the only clinic that allowed him in the room at that time. And so it was, in a sense, it was just God's providence working itself out. And when I think about my story, I just think that I never tell anyone to never give up, but I will say, like, leave room for a miracle, like, because a miracle can look all kinds of ways. Like, I know you shared with me that for you, the miracle is that you're at peace with your journey. You're at peace, you are content, you are happy, you're hopeful, and I think, that's the thing. That's where the miracle lies, where, God can take these stories and turn them into something else. Because, like I said, I keep going back to so many dreams, because Gabriel is my rainbow baby, but more than that, he's my miracle baby, because all that we went through to get to him. And to be honest, looking back, I almost lost my life. I really did. I was on the verge of losing my life to this journey, because infertility, baby loss, infertility, I always mix them up together for me, just because of how my story is. But it is a disease, and people don't always see it as that, but it is. It's a disease of the reproductive system, and it can have a devastating effect on the families that are burdened with it. And when you read the story in the Bible of Rachel and how she was doing whatever it took to get a child, I can relate to that feeling, that desire, that need to do whatever it takes. And I remember before we had little Gabriel, I remember one of the last dreams, and I'll mention this one, but I remember at one point I had another dream about God, and I was just really broken. And in the dream, I just told him, you're not for me. I hate you. And I said all of those things. And he basically said that, like, is is a sculpture, you know, those old sculptures, right? And how they're no longer intact, you know, but in a sense, they're more valuable now than they were when they were created, you know,
Right.
and it's like the broken pieces, you know, it didn't, even though in our minds it's shattered, but those broken pieces make it more valuable. You know, these stories of brokenness and pain and loss. You know, you can't, as a Christian, I can't tell someone to have hope if I've never experienced hopelessness. You know,
Right.
you can't,
Woo.
I can't
Whoa.
say God is a miracle worker if I've never been without one. So,
Right.
you know, and
Wow.
and early on I decided to share my story. Before I had a miracle, I would share my story because I never wanted to give a 2-second victory or praise report for a 2-year journey. You know, I just didn't want it to be people to think, poof, oh, it was easy for you. There you go. You had your baby, and give a little,
Mm-hmm.
oh, it was hard, but thank God he's here. No, that
No, you
stuff
have no
almost killed,
idea. Yeah,
literally. Yeah, it
I get
almost.
it. Well,
Mm-hmm.
Ciara, before we let you go, do you have any advice for anybody going through this? One last word.
Um, if you can try to find a community that understands what you're going through. I'm a part of so many Facebook groups. I was connecting with people on Instagram because my family just didn't understand what I was going through. So I needed to find a community that did. And if it starts off being a community of other people who are trying to conceive, and then you end up getting to a place of peace with with your journey, then switch that out to reflect where you are in your journey. But just always just try to find a place of community where you belong.
I love that. I love that. And that's honestly what it comes down to. Oh, Carolyn, yes, you nailed it. Yes, find your tribe. That's exactly
Yes.
what it comes down to.
Yes.
And to back up just for a second on what Michael said, much wisdom in silence. Yes. If you have nothing adding that's going to help the situation, please do not hurt the situation by just saying things that you think sound good, because honestly, probably it doesn't. Just don't. When in doubt, throw it out. Well, thank you so much, Ciara. Thank you all for joining us as well in the audience. We hope that you guys got encouragement from this. And if you know someone who may be struggling with infertility or struggling with their own losses, please be sure to share with them to watch the replay on www.lesliesaidwhat.com. They can also watch this on all major podcast networks, even though most commonly it's Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It is on all major podcast networks. So we thank you all for joining us. Ciara, again, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your story. And yes, as Carolyn also said, thank you for sharing. Because we never know whose life we touch or who gets encouraged. Because the best part about this is, yes, okay, we're live right now. We're talking about it, whatever. But we have no idea who's going to catch the replay or stumble across it on YouTube or stumble across it on a podcast that it could help and encourage. So we thank you so much for Ciara for sharing your story.
Thanks so much for having me. I love you, Leslie.
I love you too. You know it. You know it. All right, Ciara, have a good night.
Thank you. Take care, Leslie.
Bye.
And everyone joining us. Thank you.
Yes, thank you everyone that joined us. Guys, tune in next week as we continue our series on the storm that built my story. We have Miss Katie Filion coming to share her story of how she finally figured out her worth and how it did not rely on a relationship. And she learned it the hard way, but in a great way. So she's going to share that story next week. So we hope you guys tune in next week. Thank you all for coming. And this is the close of another episode of Leslie Said What?